leads to efficiency, transparency. And, I think in our experience in 2003 convention, we were very engaged, Kuwait, in that discussion. And what I still remember from that convention, that discussion, a lot of time when we discuss some of the procedures, rules, procedures, the Secretariat keep emphasizing, this is convention is different than the other one. So this applies here, doesn't apply in for example, 1972. So there is a specificity. And I think and we end up with a very successful text, as our colleagues just mentioned, on the civil interventions, because the member states were very engaged. And I think, we need to have more member states to be engaged, and this changes more because they are at the end, they are the end user. And just to give you an example, in the 2003 meetings, a lot of the files from the evaluation body are not rejected because we use the same language in the 1972 convention. And they are, saying, no, don't use that same language. So this is, we need to, but this is, this is, so this is beyond just harmonizing a few terminologies or procedures. I think you need to also harmonize, or, all stakeholders, the evaluation body, even I think, within the cultural sector, the Secretariat of different convention, they need to be, more, harmonized, and more the language, hopefully this is our end results. So my final, just to repeat, I think the member states should be more engaged, because they are, from our experience in 2003 convention, this was a very successful model. Thank you.
Thank you for all the comments and also the question. We will try to give answer one by one. So maybe not in the order, because I remember more than the last question. On what was mentioned by the delegation of Kuwait, specifically France and Turkey. We cannot, as you have been remembering us many times in all the convention, executive board, the Secretariat exists for the purpose to work for the member states. So in this sense, we cannot go further of what we have, the mandate that we have. That's why we are not forcing to put some agreement that we have in one convention, for a simple reason that in many other conventions, some member states are not part of. And we've been asked by those member states who have not ratified yet those conventions, not to use one convention where they are not part of it. I'm mentioning 4 countries that I know that call me, telling me you cannot use it. If during this information meeting, we feel that there is a consensus, for example, for putting during the debate in the 2005 convention, or in the 54 convention, 2001 convention, when we're going to discuss what has been agreed as a consensus during the 2003, we are able to do it, if you ask us. And I believe that it should be the right way to do it, because we have the discussion. And that's answering the second question to the ambassador of Panama. If we do this job, it means that during the 2005 convention, this discussion has happened. And we can shorten the discussion, because if everybody agrees or not, well, there is no discussion, because we have agreed on something specific. Then to answer to your question also, to be very clear, during the 2003 exercise and the 70 exercise, we saw that there are not so many discussions. There are some, and I have this number. In the 2003, there were 7 points that was raised. 7, we have it on list. So those, and we agreed to some consensus on the 7 difference between some member states, or between the proposal of the Secretariat of the rule model and what the members of this convention, state parties wanted to ask us to do. So we can do this exercise. And to go further, I will also mention that we are open from here to the 2005 and then the 54 and the 70 convention, 2001, to receive all your comments so that we can advance to see, because many of them really, when we revised it 2 days ago, we see that there are some wording that are not quite not well understood, or it's not well explained. But many of them are really technical. So, and that's why, for example, for the question that was raised by Turkey specifically on some specificity that you feel that they go beyond a technical review of, it's important that you understand that what we have done is also to work with each convention on the practice. There is a lot of issues, decisions that you are taking on how we proceed that are not written in the text, in the operation guidelines or what is following, or in this sense, in the composition of how we proceed the debate. But the practice is the same in most of the convention. There are some exceptions, and we have been very respectful on this specificity. But that's why we are proposing it. If member says things that it's not important to put some of these possibility that you have been using in the past, well, as from the first day, we say you are the one who have to decide what to do in each convention because you ratify those conventions. So we are open to see it, but there is nothing proposal that completely change the convention or the way that we are working. We are trying to translate what we have done in the past. And I'm sure that, and we lift it right now with the 72 convention for a committee, not for the assembly. I know that there were some rules that was not written. It was the practice. So it's better to have it by written so that in the future, we don't have this question. And I'm coming to the question to from France. Why we didn't put the 2003 discussion that we had on online meetings? For the same reason, we cannot impose a discussion that we have in one convention if in other convention we have only 122 countries that have ratified, or 148, or 151 in the case of the 2005, or 74 in the 2001. We cannot impose you to do anything that you don't want. But as I mentioned, if it's necessary and you allow us to put during the debate of each convention what has been discussed, it will help the discussion and it will shorten the time that we have. Was there any other question, Santiago, that you see? No, one thing that I wanted to mention, because I came back to this meaning. You mentioned it, I believe, Ambassador of Kuwait, on the advisory body, or the way that we can. We discover during the revision that somehow what we cannot do is to touch the conventions, comment ça s'appelle? The core of the written text of each convention. So I cannot say advisory body if the convention doesn't mention advisory body. They mention en 2003, comment ça s'appelait?
What is it called in 2003?
When you have 6 conventions, believe me, sometimes you are confused. Team is there. Tell me. Subsidiary body, and I can thank you, Tim, and we cannot change it. We saw the text, and whatever is defined in the text, because we will not touch the fundamental text. That was a decision made by you, and we are very respectful of this. So that's why there are some terminology that are completely different. For me, it's better to speak about assembly for the 6th convention, but I will not touch what was defined in the 2005 when the member states who decide to push this convention and ratify it in the way that it's written, they find that it was not an assembly. It was the conference of parties. And we don't want to touch this specificity, because I believe that at the time that the meaning of the words that were used were very specific. And we believe that it's not up to us as Secretariat to propose you to change. It has to come from you. And in this sense, that's why Santiago was very clear that they are only technical and based on practice, not based on what we believe that should be better to work with you. I believe that I answered every question. You have a subject, no? So I see, so that we can go forward with the other convention, but I see two interventions. You, the Royaume-Uni and Saint Lucie.
The United Kingdom and St. Lucia.
Future-proofing UNESCO's conventions and their reputations. I think there's an elephant in the room here when we look at the working of these conventions. Last year, the important work of the World Heritage Convention was paralyzed, owing to the impossibility of having a member state simultaneously destroy its neighbor's cultural heritage and chair UNESCO's flagship committee on the same topic. That same member state is committing flagrant breaches of the 1954 convention. Should it be allowed to participate in the meeting of high contracting parties in December on the same terms as everyone else? Last May's meeting of the subsidiary committee of the 1970 convention was singularly unedifying, as was the extraordinary meeting of the World Heritage Committee in January. Being held to account is never fun. And I feel I can say that in this meeting because at completely the other end of the spectrum, you will all remember the UK fighting very hard indeed against seeing our former World Heritage Site of Liverpool delisted. We did not enjoy this experience. We remain a little bit sore about it. But with the benefit of a bit of hindsight, I can see that this was the catalyst for us doing serious work to bring our World Heritage portfolio into order. So being held to account actually served a real and genuine purpose for us and for the convention. So my question to you, ADG, is what can we do to future-proof the rules of procedure across all of the conventions in the cultural sector? Thank you.
Saint Lucie, cher Vera, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Thank exercise, we have to do it for the General Conference also because the rules of procedure of the General Conference have many gaps in them. All this to say is, for me, it's more updating and filling the gaps than harmonization. I do not really believe that harmonization is the right word. We took a bad decision in the General Conference, not knowing exactly what it implies. But now I think what is being done is updating and filling the gaps more than harmonizing, because I don't see how we can harmonize, for instance, the rules of procedure of an assembly that doesn't have an intergovernmental body with one that has an intergovernmental body, one that has lots of powers and one that is given zero power in the convention. It's very complicated, especially that some of these rules were negotiated within a very specific context, and it was very important to have this specific rule in these rules of procedure for political reasons, and now removing it will cause problems. So there are really context and specificities to these conventions that were not easy to negotiate, and the rules were not easy to accept. Which brings me to the main issue, really time allocated to negotiate and adopt each rules of procedure and their amendments. I did not really understand the answer, or I don't know whether it was answered, the question by the ambassador of Panama. What really is the time allocated for us to reach an agreement? Because there are issues that are very good, that will go very quickly, but there are issues that will not fly. For instance, I don't see why we should remove an article on secret ballot in one assembly because the others don't have it. I would rather add it in the others rather than removing it from this one. So there are issues that are going to trigger a lot of discussions here. And this does not mean that the work is not appreciated. The work is appreciated and recognized, and the need is appreciated. But then it becomes a political discussion among member states. And this requires time. I very much appreciate your proposal, Mr. ADG, to send comments or amendments in advance. That, of course, would be very helpful. But then how would we discuss them and negotiate them? And I repeat, here time is an issue. I'm glad it went well for 2003, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the same for the others. And this is where I would really appreciate some clarification. Thank you.
I have so much faith in you, you cannot believe, in all of you. So I know that you will reach a consensus, but whatever. What is important is today that, as you mentioned, it was the same before when we had the discussion with the Secretariat of the 2003, they told me, I remember team, we're gonna need 4 days. And at the end, it was not 4 days because it was only about 7 big issues. And we achieved it in half a day, a little bit more, 4 hours. So maybe we have to wait to see how we can prepare. And I believe that the proposal that was done to share with all member states, even if the 11 countries that had not ratified the 2003, because it's important to understand that it's only 11 countries, yes, UK is one of them, that has not ratified the 2003 convention. So we are near to have a universal ratification. So it helps to understand that those discussions was between these 11 countries. But as you mentioned, and maybe I was not clear with the answer to the ambassador of Panama, I believe that we're gonna find the time to discuss this, because really when I see, and I see the point that you are mentioning specifically on this issue on the 2005 convention, because it was something discussed at the time. I remember I was a part of the civil society at the time with the coalitions when there was this discussion, and I remember the discussion specifically on the vote. That was something very specific, and there was voices telling, no, we don't gonna use whatever in the 72 is done because it's not our reference. That's a convention that is more near of civil society, and I remember this discussion. So yes, we believe, but really, we revised during the last weeks to see where are the gaps or where are the differences. And there are not so many, because in the practice, I can assure you that there is nothing new that we are putting that you are not doing. Or we are putting some issue that we have been, like the online issues that we have been obliged to face in the last years. So it's something new that it doesn't change anything on the fundamental issues. We will find the moment. What I believe that also you have been asking us as Secretariat, I'm not talking about the culture sector, but at the Secretariat of UNESCO, is to be efficient. And when I see that there was a decision that was taken in 2019, and we had to wait COVID to take in account how to do it. And I remember at the beginning when we proposed as Secretariat to do it the way that we are doing right now, we received some concerns from many member states saying, no, it's not the moment, maybe we have to do a working group to, and finally we did it. And what we have seen is that in those conventions, and these, call it harmonization, if the harmonization is the right wording, but whatever, it was a decision made by you. So we are following you on the terminology. But what happened at the end is that we see that those who advanced in the work took only in account the 72 convention. And that's absurd. Sorry to tell you, because the 72 was created, as you mentioned, in a very specific timeline. And when the 2003 and the 2005, well, we changed a little bit and we advanced in some of the issues that were important to be raised on. So it's absurd to not do it with all the 6 conventions, with all the specificity. And when I mention specificity, there are one that are completely different from all the others. And at the end, when you see the text, and we're going to go to this, to the 2001, the 2001 has a specificity that it's the technical advice, the scientific and technical, the STAB. That doesn't exist in any others because it's part of the work. It's not like the advisory body of 72. And they are part of the essence of the convention. Without them, we don't have 2001 convention. It is what it makes 2000 convention possible to exist. Without a scientific board, we couldn't do anything that we are doing because we are every discovery and every change that we are doing this convention is based on their knowledge. To answer, I will leave the last question from the UK because it's the most complicated one. But to answer the delegation of Canada, it's up to the member states to see if the process that we started in 2019 could be or should be the way forward with the committees. It's important to understand, and we revised it with Santiago at the beginning, it will be much more difficult with the committees, and you know very well, because they are very specifically from one convention to the others. But it is possible to do the same work that we have done at the technical point of view. The specificity of each convention for the committees are very different from one compared to the others. So it will take more time, and we're going to have need also of more human resources to do this harmonization, because this effort was done, I remember, during Saturday and Sundays that we worked with the teams and the team of Santiago, because during the week we didn't have time to do it during 1 year. So yes, it will take some financial resources from member states because it's a lot of workload. So yes, we want, if you want, we are able, normally it should go in this direction, but we cannot do it with the resources that we have right now. And that's very clear. You're going to see when you're going to have the discussion of the executive board, we are limited in human resources and in financial resources. To come to the awful question of UK. Smiling, Laura. Well, the exercise that we have done had not behind purposes beyond what we have been asked to do. So we are not mandated to do the reflection that you are asking us to do, independently if we can do it in each convention or not. But what you are asking, it's more complicated because it goes to the core of decision that has to be made by member states. And we cannot interfere in whatever decision you have decided to put in this convention. And right now, as the convention are written, what you are suggesting is not there. In any of the convention, the text, or in the operation guidelines, you can find whatever goes in the direction of what you mentioned. So in this case, the Secretariat cannot go beyond his mandate. I don't know if Santiago wants to mention something specifically on this question or others, and then, as I don't see any other question, we can go directly to Krista. Thank you, Santiago.
Thank you very much, Ernesto. Just a couple of comments. The first one with respect to the committees, indeed, one of the ideas that we had at the beginning was to end up also harmonizing the rules of the committees. But one needs to take into account that there's wide differences in what the committees are, what the rules are, etc. So it would take a lot of work, but the same issues that we find here, we also find in the committees with respect for motions of procedure and so on and so forth. And it is something that is achievable, but let's say one step at a time, right? Let's finish this process first, see how it works, and then maybe in the future, this is something we can take into consideration. In the same vein, I would be delighted by the challenge proposed by the distinguished delegate of St. Lucia to harmonize or to review the rules of procedure of the governing bodies of UNESCO, the General Conference and the Executive Board. Just a small anecdote, since we are in an information session, it is fascinating to think that the rules of procedure of the Executive Board have not been revised after the so-called Japanese amendment. In other words, as you may know, the amendment that took place in the 1990s changed the composition of the board from what was a composition of persons sitting in their individual capacity into a committee that is now a body that is now composed of member states. And still, the rules of procedure remain the same. And very often, some of the anomalies that you see in the rules of procedure of the Executive Board are due to the fact that these are rules of procedure that were conceived at a time in which the Executive Board was composed of persons sitting in their individual capacity. And that is something to think about maybe in the future, but it's certainly not for today. Just one more comment, also in reaction to a point made by the distinguished delegate of St. Lucia with respect to secret ballot, and I believe that she's absolutely right in that regard, and it was not the intention of the model rules. As if you were to refer to paragraph 118 of the commentary of the model rules, it indicates that secret ballot was not included in the model rules for the very simple reason that it is provided only by one of the rules of procedure of the conventions, and that's the 2001 convention. The other conventions do not provide for the possibility of secret ballot in their voting, of course, with the exception, of course, of elections. Elections is a different thing, but secret ballot in the assemblies is only provided for in the rules of procedure of the meeting of states parties of the 2001 convention. In that regard, I believe that we would need to consult back with our colleagues in the Secretariat of the 2001 convention, because I do agree with the distinguished delegate of St. Lucia that there was the proposed deletion of the secret ballot for the 2001 convention in what is now paragraph 20, article 20, paragraph 5, which becomes rule 31, paragraph 1, and maybe that would change the process, and that was not the intention. So I would suggest that we come back to that in coordination with the colleagues from the 2001 convention. My office has not had the opportunity yet to look into that text in particular, which was not yet submitted to us for revision. Thank you very much, Ernesto.
Oui, merci Santiago. Seulement pour vous dire qu'effectivement, s'il y a, par rapport à ce que Sainte-Lucie a mentionné, même si elle n'est pas